Some of you may find this story hard to believe, a son taking the life of his own mother. But this is not fiction. This is based on a true and tragic event that happened in early 2025, right here in Vietnam. For the sake of privacy and to deliver this story in a more impactful and educational way, I've changed the names and some of the details. As someone who isn't a native English speaker, I know my words may not always sound perfect, but I hope you can see my heart behind them. Please watch with an open mind and take this story not just as entertainment, but as a warning, a lesson, and a reminder of how quickly things can fall apart when we stop listening to each other. The flames lit up the narrow alley like hell had opened its doors. Screams echoed off the crumbling walls. A mother burning, her voice cracking with pain, and standing in the middle of the chaos holding an empty gas can was her own son. Mason Nguyen, 21, once the pride of the neighborhood, now a monster in plain sight. Just weeks ago he was helping his mom sell banh mi at dawn and sending his little sister off to kindergarten. His mother, Evelyn, a widow, had raised her 3 children with nothing but grit and love. People used to say, "She's tough, but her son Mason, he's a saint." But no one saw it coming. The shift, the silence, the darkness behind his eyes. After the Lunar New Year, Mason stopped working. He locked himself in his room, eyes glued to his phone, whispering to himself, twitching, forgetting to eat. Evelyn thought it was stress, or maybe heartbreak. She never imagined addiction, paranoia, madness. She never imagined that the boy she once rocked to sleep would one day light the match. It started small, just a flicker of change. Mason began staying up later than usual. Then came the all-nighters. The game on his phone wasn't just a distraction anymore, it was his whole world. He muttered about missions, enemies, and levels, as if real life was just background noise. Evelyn noticed he was skipping meals. She left food at his door, untouched. His sisters avoided him. His eyes were hollow, lips cracked, hands trembling. He stopped responding to his name. Instead, he'd stare at nothing and whisper, "They're watching." She begged him to see a doctor. He laughed in her face. Then the pills showed up. Evelyn found empty blister packs in the trash, amphetamines. When she confronted him, Mason snapped. He threw his phone across the room, screamed that she was trying to sabotage the mission. She tried to hug him. He shoved her to the floor. That night, Evelyn sat alone in the kitchen, knees bruised, tears in her lap. Her son, her sweet, gentle Mason, was gone. The next morning he disappeared. He returned hours later with a bottle of gasoline. Evelyn's hands shook when she asked him what it was for. He smiled. "You'll understand soon," he said, and walked into the house. The afternoon heat hung heavy in the alley, but Evelyn felt cold. Something in Mason's eyes, blank, detached, almost relieved, sent a chill down her spine. She watched as he placed the gasoline can in the corner of the living room, then silently pulled the curtains shut. He sat down, staring at the wall. No words, no blinking, just breathing, slow and deep. Evelyn called out to him softly, "Mason, please, talk to me." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, took the gas can, and began pouring, first on the floor, then on the couch, then on her. She screamed. Neighbors heard it first, a sound no one forgets. They rushed to their doors just in time to see Mason flick the lighter. A flash, a roar, then fire. Evelyn's body was swallowed by the flames as she collapsed to the floor. Her screams tore through the alley like a siren from hell. Mason didn't run, didn't flinch. He just stood there, watching. A neighbor, Mr. Dye, grabbed a fire extinguisher, but froze when Mason turned to him, still holding the lighter. The look on his face wasn't rage, it wasn't fear, it was peace. Like he thought he'd won. The alley that once echoed with laughter now stood in stunned silence. The patch of blackened concrete where Evelyn had fallen became a grim reminder of the unthinkable. Neighbors whispered, voices hushed. "That boy used to help carry groceries for me. He once fixed my bike for free." Mason? No, that can't be him. But it was him. The fire had destroyed more than a home. It shattered the illusion everyone held of Mason, the quiet son, the good kid, the protector. Now, he was a killer. And the worst part? No one had seen it coming. Mrs. Lynn, who lived 2 doors down, wept as she recalled Evelyn's words just days before the incident. She told me she didn't recognize her own son anymore, that his eyes looked empty. In the hospital, doctors fought to save what was left of Evelyn. Her burns were catastrophic, 3rd degree across her torso, arms, face. She was unconscious. Mason's 2 younger sisters, ages 10 and 17, were taken in by relatives. The youngest kept asking, "When is me coming home?" No one could answer. The community began to talk not just about Mason, but about the silence surrounding his spiral, the signs they all missed, the help no one offered. Regret lingered heavier than smoke. The ambulance arrived just in time to pull Evelyn from the edge of death. Her skin was blistered, blackened, unrecognizable, but she was still breathing, barely. At the hospital, a team of specialists worked around the clock. Her chances? Slim, but hope. It flickered, just like the match her son had struck. Outside the emergency room, the community began to move. Neighbors who had once stood frozen with fear now organized. They created a donation fund to support Evelyn's daughters. Local volunteers brought food, clothing, school supplies. Someone even offered therapy sessions for the kids, free of charge. Detectives questioned everyone. When asked why no one had intervened sooner, one neighbor admitted through tears, "We thought it was just stress. We didn't think it would go this far." Meanwhile, Mason sat in a dimly lit holding cell. He mumbled about the final level and unlocking freedom. When officers asked if he understood what he had done, he replied, "It was necessary." She was part of the simulation. There was no remorse, no guilt, just detachment. But for the first time, the system responded. Social workers flagged the family for crisis support. Mental health specialists joined the investigation. Too late to stop the fire, but maybe not too late to prevent the next one. 3 days after the attack, Evelyn Nguyen was pronounced dead. Her body, too badly burned, had gone into septic shock. Her heart stopped at 2:14 a.m. There were no final words, no goodbyes, just silence, and a ripple of grief that spread like a second wave of fire through the city. The news hit hard. People cried in the street. Neighbors brought white flowers and candles to the charred doorstep. Children left hand-drawn pictures of Ko Evelyn Bon Bon Me taped to the gate. But grief turned into something more powerful. Awareness. Suddenly, schools invited mental health counselors. Local news stations ran PSAs about gaming addiction and drug-induced psychosis. Parents started asking harder questions. Is my child sleeping, eating, acting strange? Conversations once whispered behind closed doors now rang out loud in family dinners and coffee shops. Evelyn's younger daughter, Hannah, 10, asked her aunt why her brother did it. The woman could only cry. But the older sister, Aria, stood up and spoke for the first time since the funeral. "He didn't know what was real anymore," she said, and no one helped. Even in tragedy, something began to shift. Not forgiveness, not healing, but recognition. Mason didn't just destroy a life. He exposed something much bigger and far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Evelyn's funeral drew over 100 people, neighbors, co-workers, strangers who had only heard her name after she died. Her daughters stood quietly beside her framed photo, too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, but old enough to carry the pain. The small alley in Cantho, once ordinary and overlooked, became a symbol, not just of violence, but of neglect of mental health, of community silence, of invisible cries for help that went unanswered. Evelyn was gone. But the system that failed her, that was still alive. And now, people were watching. The local school started a pilot mental wellness program, small at first, group talks, anonymous journals, but it grew. Police officers in the district began training to identify signs of drug-induced psychosis. Social workers reached out to families flagged for emotional instability, and in the middle of it all, a white wall stood where Evelyn's home used to be, covered with handprints from children and a single line painted in red. Please, don't stay silent anymore. Sometimes tragedy is the only thing loud enough to wake a sleeping world. Evelyn never got the help she needed, but because of her, hundreds of others might. Her life was quiet, her death was loud, but her legacy, unforgettable. Mason's story isn't just about a tragic crime, it's about every warning sign that was missed, every moment someone stayed silent, every time we assumed they'll be fine. Mental illness doesn't always look like madness. Sometimes it looks like isolation, like obsession, like a quiet boy who used to love his mother until he didn't even know who she was. Addiction to games, to stimulants, to alternate realities. It can strip away a person's soul before anyone sees it happening. The lesson? Don't wait until it's too late. If your child changes, if your sibling drifts away, if your friend withdraws and seems like someone else, don't ignore it. Speak up. Intervene. Ask hard questions. Push past the discomfort, because silence isn't safety, it's fuel. And sometimes, all it takes is one spark to burn everything down.